Hello, everyone. This is the Learning Data Science community. We are going to see Chapter 12 of Outstanding Shiny. Oh my God, that's a really long one. But Outstanding User Interface for Shiny apps. And we're going to cover, understand, and develop new Shiny inputs. Our learning objective is to understand how Shiny inputs work behind the scenes and understand how to get new Shiny inputs. This will be the first part of this chapter. Next week, we're going to cover the second part. So let's talk about input bindings. After initializing our Shiny app, Shiny runs several JavaScript functions behind the scenes. Some of these functions are exposed from the Shiny JavaScript object. And we can see it if we run this app. Let's do it. Just copy and we just paste here in the console. If we open the app here, we see as we change the slicer that the app updates. But what happens if we go here and inspect the element and stop the Shiny app bindings? Like we like Shiny point. Let me go to the presentation. Input bindings here. And we type Shiny on bind all and then document. So we are going to start the binding process. Shiny point on bind all document. And we just type here. So all the JavaScript stop working. So they can't any more updates. So we see like, okay, the UI is changing, but it's not communicating with the server part. But we go remove the and just type bind all. Now we see that the chart is changing again. So basically that binding part is going to make sure that our Shiny app is working correctly using the JavaScript part. So you know that you have the Shiny, that is the server part, the R part, but we also have the JavaScript part. And the bindings are the way that Shiny knows how to interact the R part, the server, and the client with JavaScript. Go to the next. So, adding some JavaScript to the UI. When we don't have a much, but we have the trigger as on click. It's an attribute of the button tag, and basically you can use it almost for every tag that is not listed in these sections. You know, base, the break. You know, break is not for me for adding that click. Heads that are more, you know, the structural parts, HTMLs, iframes. Otherwise, even it's a test, a paragraph, or a list, or it's clickable. That's why I know that in the did web, when people use Onion, they don't activate JavaScript because they can. You go to a malicious web, even though you just highlight a test, it can execute JavaScript. We normally placing buttons, but that doesn't matter. And the point is that we can run this Shiny app and add action button as normally we use the HTML tab, and we add the attribute on click. And the click we just type the JavaScript that we saw before on bind all or on bind and bind all document. And it will have the same process. The point is that we won't need to do it in the console. So we just copy and paste this up and run it here. We can stop the old one. And we see here that when I type, you know, the test updates. No problem at all. But when I click on bind and I edit the test, yeah, nothing is changing until I click bind again. So yeah, that's a useful way that we can use for many elements in order to add JavaScript code or execute some JavaScript code using buttons or any other elements. And let's talk about the input structure. We have this structure for most of our input in Shiny. The point, the CSS that is combined with it, we show in a different way. But everything have an ID that we have here. Oh, the ID. You have a type. The type can be a button, can be an email, can be a password. We said those are the ones arrange, test, on time, color, URL, week. So yeah, we have many types that we can select from. And also we have the class. These two ones are the more important ones in order to identify when we are creating new inputs, because we need to make sure that we can identify what are the elements. Okay, I want you to apply this methodology for every tab that use this type, or use this class. For custom inputs, the class will be really important, because in the class you will attach some CSS, but also you will apply some JavaScript logic related to that. And also the value is an attribute of the input class. So you are not going to contain between brackets. You're going to place it as an attribute also. And that's the basic structure for most of the inputs that we have in China. But once you have the HTML rhythm, you need to define the input bindings, because they are needed to provide. You need to provide to Shiny, so you understand how to interact with your custom HTML. And the purpose of defining the bindings is to know how to find the input that you have. Okay, I know you're looking for an input with this type and this class. Okay, I know that everything that happens and related to this method are just for this input, not for the other one, and don't get confused. Even for the default Chinese inputs. Also a method to get the unique ID, for instance, was the data that you are going to provide, what the kind of data, to start method for starting the value. Okay, it's test, but you are going to use this method for starting this test. How to detect when the value changes. So, that interaction, you need to define JavaScript code so that interaction happens. Also, when the input value changes, that you place once and it will keep static all the time. People can change it, but you need to define and explain how it's going to notice that change. How to date your input from the server for the date function we have in Shiny. How to manage the communication frequency also. Okay, you can call this function 5 times every second, so you need to apply some limits to that request. How to set out and clean inputs, element resources, and it based on this input JavaScript. So this is like the object fabric. In R we don't have, I have seen that in S6, for object-oriented programming, but normally for oriented programming language like JavaScript, you have a data fabric and you have some methods, and you can then create one particular copy of that object and then modify those methods. So it's like you have one object with some defaults, and these are the defaults. Okay, I have find function that you really need to specify, get ID, get type, get value. And you see all these functions are empty because they're expecting you to write them. But they just place them in order you know, oh, you need to define them somehow. And that's what we're going to cover here. We can see, we can have some explanation. So the find method have the argument scope, defines how shiny ESS locate the HTML elements when within given scope, a div to treat as an instances of your custom input. This method must be implemented for proper element selection, get ID, retrieves a unit identifying the input element using data input ID or element ID, currently linked to the client side input with the corresponding Chinese server object. Get type. Just the type of the input, maybe numeric, maybe character, so that the server can properly uh, this realize the JSON data. Yeah, so when
I cannot hear you anymore. Still no sound.
now, can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. It's not specified, it defaults to general type. So basically, it's like the strategy, like you know, Jenny doesn't know how to do with your HTML. So you are getting all these methods, and these are default names. They are not names that you need to, you know, invent yourself. And also the argument are by default. So also get value, the current method to extracting the current value we have, subscribe, set the event listeners, so change the keyboard, maybe a click. So what action are doing the people in order to send some updates to the server? That's really important. That's the way that Shiny updates. The triggers, you know, the trigger provided, this keeps Shiny aware of the real-time changes in your custom component. Unsubscribe, remove the event listener attached to unsubscribe, ensure efficient resource management and preventing memory leaks when the input removed from the DOM. Maybe you say, okay, I will remove this, so I won't need this binding anymore. So you don't need to wait any response. Receive message, allows any server to update the input element by sending data. Basically, by the update function we have by default in Shiny, like, okay, update to max, update to minimum. And you do it from the R side. Get the state, capture the complete state of the input beyond its value, which is default complete inputs with multiple properties. Get rate policy, specify the rate in which the updates are sent to the server using something like the bonds or something that I haven't investigated this one, but we have these two strategies in default to know, so you need to specify that part. It it helps, you know, to delay the response so you don't get your server too busy in tasks that are not important. We will see in a moment.
I have a
Uh,
question about this table. Uh, so how did you create this table? All of these method names. Are you getting it from the input binding.js file?
I took the input binding and I passed to ChatGPT and asked them to create a table.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, this is really nice. It puts everything in the definitions. It's really useful. Thank you for putting this on the
Yeah,
slides.
I will share it in the slides, you know, so once they approve, you will
Yeah,
have it.
yeah.
Yeah, because I was reading the documentation and I saw, oh my God, I don't have any idea why it's doing this. horrible. So let me just ask ChatGPT, as he knows more JavaScript than me. He
Right.
will understand what's going on.
Yeah,
And also,
thanks.
of course, these are the part that we're going to see part by part across this presentation. So
Mhm.
I understand more that these definitions invoke when the input element is first rendered. So this is the first, the first part that runs. So as your global variables, anything that you need to set up in the JavaScript side, you need to place it here. They place an example for the framework that they use for Shiny Mobile, that they use this initialization function, but the author say that we don't need it most of the time. And dispose, I haven't seen this one, code when the input element is removed. The method cleans up the event listener and any other resources to prevent memory leaks and maintain application efficiency. So all these, are available, have defaults that maybe are not really useful, empty. But yeah, there are options that you can keep as default or just override. We are going to see how to override them. It's important that all these JavaScript code needs to live in a folder in some way. If you are creating a package, you can use this method. You grab a function or dependencies, use the HTML dependency just as we were doing CSS. You place the name, the version. In this case, they are using the system file in the runtime. So go to this folder and you will see the input binding. See, you will find the name based on the argument, because most of the time the dependency function goes empty because you are going to place one. But for this example in the book, they have many to show step by step what we are doing. And that's why they have this argument. But for us, that okay, we know what we want to input, and you're going to place one location. You don't need to use this argument. It's not mandatory. Just to specify each of the JavaScript files. Of course, you can also use the same function and just place to your point to the file directly. You are placing the JavaScript code in your www folder. Also it's a possibility just to place a normal dependency. And once you have that dependencies, okay, let's create an input test input. They just create the element test, have a div just for formatting, and the key part is, okay, we are calling the dependency, as part of they can place it anywhere, but they just place it here, and they just place the input as we saw before, like, okay, with an ID, the type is test, and input test is the important class that we distinguish our custom element. And when we have all our HTML defined with its dependency included, I think we can also include in the Shiny app. Well, I was explaining what we have in the JavaScript. What they have in the JavaScript is the structure that we need to follow. Okay, we have the calling function. So, it will call after all the document is rendered. You remember that part that there was a shortcut for making that in jQuery. And then they pick the Shiny object and pick the input binding methods. And these are the object fabric, and they create a default one, custom, and then they going to extend the input binding and then register that, and that's it. That's the whole process we are going to do. In this case, they just defining the find function, the find method, and they just, okay, they call scope, that is the document, pick the find function, and pick the class input test. That's the only reference that I'm using, because the default Shiny input is already using the test type. So but this is just a CSS selector. That's why we are using point, to say, okay, this is in class level. and really easy. But these are they are not going to show this anymore, but this is like a list that they're creating here. So every time you see a new function, they will place a comma and just use the same syntax. Find, double points, function, and just return the value they need to return or set the value they need to set. And now that we have, our JavaScript code, our dependency inside our HTML part, we can just place, okay, let's place the HTML here. Let's just place this output and just render the output. Really simple Shiny app. If we just copy, we can see what we have. Uh, Example, and we need to run the example number 1. And yeah, we have the input element. We don't see much interaction because the output is not producing anything because we have no methods for sending anything to the Shiny element. But we go here and inspect the element, and we go to the console, and we just reload the page. We see that, yeah, the console part, the JavaScript code, is working. So it's finding the element, basically. The point is that it doesn't have actions. It doesn't have the other bindings for making it. You see that it have console, scope, and just print the what they find. We go here, I think, yeah, you see that the input is also showing that, pointing to that HTML. So it's finding the element.
I recently saw an input called a shiny time. It's actually a package shiny time that has an input time. Let me share that in the chat. Can you
Okay.
take a quick look if it is also using something similar? Uh, because if it is, that would be an interesting case for us to study.
Yeah, let's have a quick look. So the JavaScript code should be here. So we go to maybe www. Let me see. Input binding time.
Yeah, it seems to be using the same thing.
Yeah, you have find label. But it should have the find. Let me see. Okay, input binding. Okay, we
Mhm.
create the input binding here, and here we have find, and here my shiny input, my shiny time input. So yeah, it's using the same method. And you
Yeah.
see, every method is separated by a comma.
Mm.
And we are going to see how we can create, well, it have more, get value is more complex here. Then it has a set value, receive.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a perfect example for what we are watching. We are going to
Although
see.
if you look at the usage of the time input, it is very simple. It's just hours, minutes, seconds, but the JS code is very long.
Yeah, great. So, but this is an HTML element, so input. Okay.
Yeah, and it looks like what you
Okay,
see.
this
Yeah,
enter date, right. Enter time, so 12. I imagine this is hours, minutes, and seconds, right?
yeah. So
Yeah,
it looks very
perfect.
simple, but it is complicated in the JavaScript
Yeah,
side of things.
in the JavaScript code. So you will go and see the how is the R element created. Yeah, it's basically a really short package. Time input, have some ES statements, get default time, you have some CSS, form control. Okay, you have the input binding time, JavaScript. Yeah, well, it show us it would be in the www folder. Okay, here's the class. My shiny input that we saw before in the find function. So yeah, it's the same methodology that he's applying for this use case.
Very
So that is
interesting.
it's a really great example to spam. And it's also an example that you'll be able to understand easier. You don't I haven't even using it. It was okay, the JavaScript should be here. the, so yeah, it's easy this one. And then you register your binding and Shiny will be able to find it basically. And what okay, we already run this fun this yeah. I was debugging this part, but I don't remember it was really good. The point is that the output is showing. Of course, it want also to show that you can debug the core. That's something that he has to do lots of time in this chapter. If we go to sources, if we go to custom input, we can see the JavaScript that we saw before. You know, and you can click over the element, reload the page, and now you are in the debugger mode. So now you can call a scope and then find what we have in the instruction here. Find, reload the page, and then you can basically retrieve the same output. So if I can just copy this and go to the console. Yeah, perfect. And now you will see the same output, you know, like you have the ability to have the scope and get the element. I can close this, go back to the presentation. Here is explaining the initialize output. In this case, you just create this trigger for the 7 framework 7 that I use for Shiny Mobile. L on toggle means that we are looking for the elements having the toggle class, and toggle create is internal to the framework 7 API. So that's the way that they just initialize the API in the JavaScript side. Now for get value is also really simple. You get the element that is basically a document, and it have already a method for getting the value and each of the value. And really similar, we can create the method. They just we get value with get value. Also, the output will show that's what they want to explain. Just by defining the get function, it would be enough for showing the value first time, but not today. You know, first the get will show you first time. We can confirm the JavaScript code that they are using for this function in the sources. And here we have the same return, and then also we have in the console the output. No, nothing else. And setting the value is also easy. You just need to place the value inside the parentheses. Before in the get, you just were leaving the parentheses open, you know, without anything. But when you place the value inside, it's saved by reference. I know that in R we don't have many examples of that, but if you are used to, I love using a data table data upon table, and we have the semicolon function, and it basically right that creating a copy of the data frame to date that it just change the value by reference. So it's tricky at the first time because you need to know that even your data frame goes the same, the value is changing and it's not the same anymore. And also I know that in Chinese also we have the bars. I don't remember how the names of that bars. I don't remember, but they're like bats that we have in Chinese for studying data. I think are reactive bars. I'm not misleading the name.
Reactive expression.
Mm, reactive expression. Yeah. Uh,
Like there are reactive expressions and reactive values.
yeah, reactive values. Yeah, there are like reactive values. Yeah, reactive values. You have their value, and you just place it inside the parentheses, and it will just set the value.
Mhm.
And then in the send and the receive message, now you are receiving the message. This data is the JSON that are sent to JavaScript. And from that object, you can pick the value attribute. And from that value, you can use the set that we already defined here. It's the same. How we know it's the same? Because you use the this argument, so you just call. Even though you are defining the methods, he knows, okay, I know that you are defining this method, and I will call it from the same list you are creating. So from this list, you will pick the set, and you just need to get from the JSON the value. And it's really simple in this case. So L is the done element, value is the new value that we want to change. And this if expression data has on property value is to make sure to don't set the value as empty. Like, okay, you don't have any value to show, please don't do anything. That's the way to do it. And based on these methods, we can now create our input function, updating input from R. So you have your button, you click it through the WebSocket that we create with JavaScript. Then the input triggers the observe event. So you click in your server side the button, it sends a trigger to the update observe to observe event, and observe event you will call the session and send input message. And from this input message, it will receive the value and set the value and update the value in the input. That's the strategy we are going to apply. And it's good to remember we are going to use the session. What is the session object in Chinese? I know that we used to call it in the server side session, and what we're going to do with session. Session is the instance of the Chinese session RC class. So we have methods that we need to use. It's unique for any user. That is good, because when you are sending, that's only happening for that particular client, not for all clients. And have all information about the input, the output, the client data is using. And have the method send input message. That is the one that we are going to use. And also have send custom message that we haven't seen before. But these are the two methods that we need to use in order to update a message from R, our server, to the client. So let's do it. Okay, let's create our update function with the ID for its own ID, the ID that we want to edit. We'll use the get default reactive domain, and we call it session. And from this session, you will have the methods and input message. So you just need to, in the message, place the value. And that's all that you need to do in your server side for creating that function. And then I also explained that you can send more than one message. You just need to place it in a list. This no drop nulls is just if one of these elements is null because the default is null. It will just remove it. I didn't know about this internal function in Shiny, but I normally do when I have these cases when I'm using list. So you have a list, I have a, and then I have null. Then I use the filter function from base R and define the function is not null. Of A. Let me see. This no function. Let me just write F. Yeah, basically that was the point. It wasn't showing that this pipe works in that way that it was showing the list, show. And basically here, even though I have two elements, as the second is null, I'm just showing a list of one element. That's the trick I use. If you don't want to, you want to do something like that and don't want to import Shiny. So you are using Shiny, it's perfect way. I didn't know about this. It's really right. Yeah, you don't send them. And when you click, this is the function they're creating. So you have your custom test input, you have the ID is caption, and the title is caption, the default is data summary. We have the binding pointing to the binding of JavaScript. Then you have the date bottom with some class to show it as green. And the output. That's the structure you see here. And then they just call to the update function and say, okay, I want to replace data summary with new value. Let's see it here. The same code I have here. So I have this value. I can change it. It doesn't update yet. We will need to have the supply function. When you click over update, it shows the new test. The really interesting thing is that you can hack this using the debugger. I can intercept the message in the debugger and place whatever value I want. So we go to sources, we find our JavaScript code that we already know what is, and then they ask me to change set value. So I will intercept this part. I will click here. I will reload my Shiny app. Then you just need to get this value, data value. That is the message I get from R. I'm not in the debugger. I'm not running the debugger really. Let me try to do it again. Let me place it here, for example. And now let me try to reload the app. Or maybe the set value also. Okay, now in the debugger. Now if I go here, I'm not picking the correct way to use the debugger, but we are going to get it. Now we go to the notes because I while they're pointing,
I have a
open
question
inspector. Yeah.
about the update. So we do have in Shiny, we have text input and update text input. So update text input is also provided a separate function for us for the user, right? And then for all the other inputs, like for the slider input, we also have an update slider input. So here we need to create an update input function that works to update that value and to send it from the server to the client. So is that the same update function that is used uh, by the user as well and also by the developer? So in this example, on this slide, you have the update custom text input. And this is then sending the input value from server to the client. So is this the same update function that a user of the app will also use, or is it only for the developer?
I think it's the same that they use. Maybe they grab it and but because the user don't see this part.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe you can just rather than showing the session part, I will just grab the session part as a internal function, internal
Mhm,
part, and then just send it because the for the user they just visit the function with an ID and a value.
mhm. Right. Yeah, we do see these input parameters. We see input ID, value, session. Yeah, yeah, it is the same thing.
Yeah, it should be the same. Well, for the because the user won't see the session part. They don't.
So, so is this required for the input binding to work, or is this optional?
To me, this is optional because no, imagine not all the Shiny inputs have an update function related.
Mhm.
So you are not creating a that function, then you don't need to use the binding
Okay, okay, got it. Thank you.
because you see what we were doing before. We wasn't uh, we wasn't using that, and the page was rendering. Like you can use just the defaults. The point is that you will have all the interactions you want. So every interaction you want with your channel, you will need to create a binding for that.
Got it.
Like, okay, you know that I create get value and then I was able to render, but I haven't created any method for updating after showing changes. Um, it should be able, I should be able to use the debugger here. Let me try to do it. It's in set value. Yeah, I think it's like yeah, receive message and set value. Let me try to reload this page, but not the debugger. Oh, this is not really working. Maybe it's in the book. The book is here.
Can you try putting it on line 16 on the code?
Okay, it shows 17 and
Yeah.
14.
Hmm.
Let me see what I have. Okay, 17. Okay, that's different. And 14, that. Let me see now the debugger works. Mm, I will reload this again once, and we won't be able to. Because when I was practicing, I was able to do it many times. So yeah, I don't know why it's not working now. So go to sources. I have selected the same lines, 17 and 14. I'm not getting the debugger. Uh, okay, now let's see. No, I'm not getting to the debugger. But the point you intercept this data value in the debugger session, you should be able to, no, but it's not really, the debugger is not working for me for a reason I don't know. Remove edit breakpoint, December breakpoint. And if I just, yeah, what's the problem? I'm not clicking the button. That was the point. I'm not clicking the button, so the method is not calling. So let me click. That was the point. Now I get data point value. I'm getting the value. Now, if I just say equals to this is R, then I just continue. You see? Yeah, that was the point. I got confused because I need to click the button.
Yeah.
That was the only part I was missing. Yeah, custom message and we'll just show. You see, it doesn't show in the output. Yeah. You just change it in the input part. In order to data in the input part, we need to use the subscribe. I don't really know why they select this name. To me, subscribe doesn't tell about anything about. Was expecting like listening, getting triggers. No, but they just call it subscribe. But subscribe the way that you can select the way that your Shiny app will pick and update. In this case, they have key up. So when you are typing, and input when you are copying and pasting. That's the two methods we are going to see. And also they call it the callback, but they won't show more details about it. You see these listeners, these events follow the syntax, like this name convention mean. They have the event listener, point, the binding name. In this case, the binding name is called sustain test binding. Yeah? So that's the way they are calling them. And so the same test they have in both cases. Yeah, perfect. Same test. Let me see. Yeah. And then they say, Bob, it won't update when you call the click button. That's the point. Even though when typing, when pasting, but when you click over the button and change the test, it won't also update. So you need to use the listen exchange for that. So you have the subscribe function, and you will have listening when typing and listening when changing the test by clicking. And also when you also need to apply the trigger here of change when receive message. When you receive a message from the server, please also open this change trigger and update the Shiny app. This trigger part is part of jQuery. I think at this point, I didn't place the example of the Shiny app. Yeah, I forgot it. Let's just open that up. So the last time we ran example 3. So we'll go here, example 4. When we change it, nothing happens. But if we type it, it changes. Because at that point, I haven't updated the change method. In the step 5, they did. Now, if I click the button, yeah, it changes. If I type, it changes. So yeah, it's basically working. If I just copy and paste, it's also doing, like it's doing all that we asked to do. But you also need to apply this trigger for the event. But what happens? The typing part is really, it's making too many calls to our server. So we need also to select a rate policy. So it can delay until I type all the words, and when I type all the words, then it goes to the Chinese server. Oh, for that working, when typing, you need to place the true value here in the callback. I don't have many details about this callback function, but they use it for that purpose. Okay, and now we can run the app here. Sits. And I think now it will, you see the delay? So I type, but until I don't stop, it doesn't show. So I have some delay. That helps to your server side to don't be so busy. The number of milliseconds that you want to specify for that part depends on how much speed your user needs. So if you think and you see that your app is too slow or too fast, it will depend on of try and error. So nobody can tell you, no, this number is bad, this number is good. It depends on how the people is going to use your app. And also the feedback that you receive, because you can set a value and then you receive feedback, this is too slow. I know that I need to change this value. And yeah, we have the same function, the policy settings. And as we saw before, the same method, like, okay, I have my binding, I extend and apply all methods that we saw before. And they recommend us to register the binding in Shiny using this name convention, your packet name, point, binding name, to avoid conflicts. And also, we have these two methods, get ID and get type, that we are going to see later in the chapter, more in depth. Most of the time, they work really well just by default. So it's not like mandatory you to change it, but maybe later in the chapter we will see more detail what are the use case for this, why you would like to change these methods. Anyway, well, that's it for this first part of the chapter.
Very nice presentation, and thank you for putting in the effort to put that table at the beginning. It's going to be very useful.
Yeah.
Do you think it's possible to use like a input from the HTML canvas where you can draw something or you can write in your own handwriting? Do you think that kind of input is possible?
I think all is possible. Just imagine that for HTML, uh, uh, this value, you can apply a click method. Just imagine.
Mm.
So you have any element, any shape that people click over, or type over, any reactivity is possible.
And I'm just thinking what would be the output of that, because it is possible to convert that kind of if someone is writing on the canvas, then we want
Let
to
me see. And
convert it.
you have an example of what you mean? And let me see the canvas. No.
Yeah, there is a handwriting module that I found. Let me quickly.
Like this one? No.
Yeah, so the result of that uh, on the canvas, when once you have written something, can we
Mhm.
recognize that input? I think that's out of the scope of Shiny. It's like a
Well,
different model that needs to be used, but we need to somehow register the input.
in my mind, it would be like you want to create a post, for example, a posting object. So I have this layout already created,
Hmm.
and then I want people to start adding postings here. Yeah, I would need, it would be also a test input, really similar to what we have. You just need to define the CSS to show it as a posting.
Yeah.
Because a posting is just a box, you know, with some color, with some shape,
Mhm.
and then you just need to find a way to move around this posting, Like, okay, I'm going to drop this and paste in this position. I don't know how, but that's not like Shiny related. In this case, it will be more CSS. How will you move that element? Because you see, placing that value is more related to how it interact in the HTML page. Like, okay, this is a position, and this tag go to this position. Maybe
Mhm.
using before, after. It seems to me more like a CSS work, a big work. Like for imagine for HTML would be all this like a list, and a post it can be a chart of it list, the indentation.
Yeah,
And then once as we have maybe in PowerPoint, I have PowerPoint here, but I have LibreOffice. I think I don't have anything like Office Drop now. Impress should be.
so I put one link on the chat.
Okay.
Take a
Oh,
look on that. I'm thinking about something like this. I've experimented using send input message, something like that. I don't remember now, but
okay, okay. I have this drawing.
so this is for writing instead of drawing. So if you write
Okay,
something and change the language to English,
okay, perfect. So I go to English. Let me
scroll
just
down and
reload.
yeah, you can also
So I
erase
have,
it.
for example, I just write hello.
Yeah, and then if you scroll down, you should be able to see the result of that.
So I
So
sent.
send, yeah.
Okay,
So it
and
has
now
multiple predictions, and the first prediction is correct.
yeah, the first position is correct.
Yeah.
Okay, this is like a more deep, deep learning project,
Mm.
because test recognition is one of the
Mhm.
basic project we have for deep learning.
Yeah,
So,
and this is I actually look at the code for this. This is
mhm,
a JS module. It's handwriting.canvas.js.
mhm.
That if you go to their GitHub, you will see the full code for that. So I tried prompting ChatGPT, and then it asked me to basically put that in a Shiny JS using the Shiny JS function, and then I was able to recreate it. But I was wondering if we need to bind it as an input and provide it as in a different package, then this could be used by anyone.
Yeah, maybe yeah, I should be able. But because I think the input in this case is an image,
Yeah.
because for deep learning, you get an image. And of course, the functionality of writing in this way is 100% JavaScript. Like,
Yeah, it is sent to Google actually, and Google is then interpreting this. And
okay, Google
yeah,
it have the model.
yeah, yeah.
But in this case, nothing is happening in your server side. You won't need it. Like, okay, you will need to get the response, and
Um,
you know, like to show it here, it will be like most as an API, and I will
mhm,
just render as an output because you are not interpreting inside R. I will create a binding. The deep learning happens in R. If you are using just a Google API, and getting already these values, the results,
mhm.
and you won't need to create a binding.
So far we have not used the shiny dot set input value, right?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I
Like,
think
okay,
it's going to be in probably in the next two chapters. So shiny dot set input value is what ChatGPT suggested to me to use. And when I use that, then I can basically put this just like this page as a shiny app. So I think
well,
it's
but
probably
set
something.
input
Yeah.
because the point is that this is not unless that you want to code this, this drawing part
Hmm.
for Shiny. You are just using this. Like, I think that the already JavaScript API already produced the image,
Hmm.
and then I will send the image to R. And if you are using that way, you are producing the prediction for R. I think that you would need to use the binding somehow because you will say,
Hmm.
okay, I need to get the value of the image
Yeah.
and send that image to R.
Mm.
But in this case, the JavaScript already sending the image to Google, and then from Google you are receiving the output of the output, not even the image. But if you were making this with your own model, then you would need, in my mind, you really need to create your own input binding.
Got it. Yeah, I
Or
think
otherwise, no.
yeah, that makes sense. Right, right.
If you are running this in your own, the model, yeah, you will need to create your binding.
Mm.
But in this case, that is sending to Google, no, because you are receiving already the response for Google. It
Yeah,
is nothing to do with the Chinese. Once you receive it, you just place it in output, as an API.
right, right. Makes sense.
So perfect. Now we can stop this.
Yeah, thanks.